summer is the culmination of the year. I've always been inclined to count the years of my life by how many times I have welcomed summer with warm, sunny days and gently rustling nights. The year 1939 was a very eventful year in Germany and had a tremendous impact on the lives of Germans. This summer marked the end of the happy and carefree time of my youth. I wandered once more along the beach, the pine forest in the mountains, walked past the stodgy fields, along the floodplain in the valley, canoed down the Weser River. Anneliese was with me during this most beautiful summer of my life. We wandered together through the castles of Mellenbeck Abbey and listened to the organ at the old Fischbeck Abbey. We sunbathed, rode our motorcycle through the forest of Teutoburg or through the Jexter Valley to Zoning, climbed the slopes of Hohenstein together and bathed in the cool water of the Weser. We did not notice the clouds gathering on the political horizon. What could have changed in our lives, even if the tensions that had accumulated in Europe had reached a climax? In recent years, Germany has thrown off the shackles of the Versailles Agreement more and more. Do we not have the right to live freely in this land? Poverty, misery, unemployment, they have already been done away with in the Third Reich. Given this, is it any wonder that Austria seeks an alliance with a strong and prosperous Third Reich? Common sense tells the Sudetese to do the same. Memel also wants to free itself from Lithuanian domination. The people of Germany put their trust in Hitler. It was like that everywhere. At the National Socialist Party Congress in Nuremberg or at a harvest festival in some backwoods village of Buckeberg, just 15 kilometers from Hameln. I was only one of many millions of young enthusiasts who believed Hitler unconditionally and devoted themselves wholeheartedly to him. Anneliese and I were enjoying a carefree summer, not thinking about the black clouds gathering on the horizon. No need to worry, the Führer is taking care of us. That's what 90 million Germans around the world thought. At the beginning of the summer, I applied to become an officer in the Air Force. I hoped to combine military service and the freedom of a pilot. On July 5, I was called for an entrance exam. It lasted 4 days. Psychologists, doctors, teachers, and officers tested me and 4 other candidates for intellectual and physical readiness for our chosen careers. The first day we were examined by doctors of various specialties. On the second day, we took tests and answered hundreds of questions asked by officers and psychologists. On the third day, we were placed in a 3-dimensional chair that rotated in different directions. This was a test of our reactions. We were placed in a low-pressure chamber, resembling a state-of-the-art torture chamber, where we experienced a lack of oxygen for a period of time. On the 4th and final day, our physical fitness was tested. Running with obstacles, long and short distances, jumping, throwing discus and javelin, exercises on bars and crossbars, swimming and boxing. It was the most rigorous and comprehensive exam of my entire life. In the evening we were announced the results. 2 candidates passed the exam. One of them turned out to be me. August 27, 1939. Our school has been turned into a night barracks, and reservists have been drafted into the army. They say there's trouble on the eastern border of Germany and Poland. Letter carriers scurry the streets all night delivering summonses and telegrams. August 28, 1939. The Reich government has announced full mobilization. We are on the brink of war. A battalion of reservists is formed in our school. The same thing is happening in all the other schools in the city. There are only grey uniforms around. The town is full of soldiers. August 29, 1939. I was informed that I would soon receive a summons from the Air Force with orders to pack. My classmates joined the volunteers. In the evening they were already in uniform. August 30, 1939. The leader of the local Jungfolk organization received the summons, and I took command of about 4,000 young men of Hameln County. They are to be sent to help the soldiers in auxiliary tasks. In the warehouses they should help in loading food, uniforms, weapons and ammunition. Helpers are needed in the barracks. In the field kitchens they should peel potatoes, etc. Wherever there are soldiers, the guys come to their aid. In the evening, the first of the newly formed battalions loaded into the train at the freight station. The cars are decorated with flowers as the train departs for the east, but the faces are serious. Among those departing, I recognize several classmates. Steel helmets contrast sharply with the youthful faces. August 31, 1939. News of Polish atrocities against the German minority made a terrible impression today. Thousands of Germans have fallen victim to the massacres committed today in what was once German territory. Many more arrive in Reich territory telling gruesome stories. September 1, 1939. At 40 a.m., German troops crossed the Polish border with fighting. This means the beginning of the war. The last summer of my youth was over. So the insignificant, the individual is swallowed up by the merciless flow of time. I must accept the war that has swept over me like an avalanche. I must become hard as steel, or I will be crushed. My most ardent desire now is to become a soldier. September 5, 1939. On September 2, Goering ordered the mobilization of all civilian air defense services. Yesterday came the unexpected news that England and France had declared war on the German Reich. Today, sirens howled over Hamon for the first time to warn of a military raid as British bombers attacked the port and German military installations on the North Sea coast. September 8, 1939. Warsaw fell. The war with Poland proved to be lightning fast. The superiority of the German army allowed an unstoppable march to victory. Inexpressible sensation seized us when the German prisoners, inhabitants of Poland, were released. Pictures of horrible atrocities and crimes against every idea of humanity were revealed to our army. Not far from Bromberg and Torun, mass graves of thousands of Germans tortured by Polish communists were found. The Polish army has been defeated. The Polish military aviation has been destroyed. Here in Germany, everyone says the war will be over by Christmas. People want peace. But we had to pay for peace with human lives. September 11, 1939. This morning, my father left for duty in Poland with his police department. My sister survived the first air raid by the British on the island of Wangderouge in the North Sea. My mother and I were left alone in our house in Hamon. In a rat hole. It's surprisingly quiet here. Soon I'll be leaving too. The war in Poland is coming to an end. We can probably already hope that our family will be reunited by Christmas after the separation. I wanted to know more about the date of my departure, but I didn't get a clear answer. Only vague promises. I don't know why, but I want to be in a real war. September 27, 1939. A few days after the entrance exams, I found out that I was accepted. My schooling was over. Many times I cursed my old school, but I loved it nonetheless. Goodbye, dear school. Goodbye, good old Dr. Trebitius. He forgave me for skipping his lessons and shook my hand for a long time, wishing me good luck in life and service. Yesterday I learned of the death of two of my classmates. Both of them died in the Battle of Radom. October 30, 1939. Today I finally received a summons to enlist in the Air Force. I am to report to the 11th Training Regiment located at Schoenwald, near Berlin, on November 15. The war in Poland has lasted a little over a month. Comparatively little activity has been seen on our western borders. Only aviation is involved in operations. I am looking forward with great anticipation to my first combat sortie. November 13, 1939. Slowly the days stretch on, merging into weeks, and I am tormented by impatience. In just 2 days I will be a soldier. My last day at home. Mother prefers not to talk about my departure. I know it will be difficult for her to be alone. November 14, 1939. I left Hamon this afternoon. Everything will be all right, Mother said. She and Annalise saw me off, waving to me as the train began to pull away. It was my last night as a civilian. I spent it in Berlin. The hustle and bustle of the big city had tired me out. November 15, 1939. 9:15 p.m. I arrived at the Schoenwald airfield, where the 11th Training Regiment is located, and reported to the duty officer of the 4th Battalion. I am henceforth on military service. At the depot I was given pants that hung out on me, a tight uniform, a pair of incredibly heavy boots, and a steel helmet that was very small for me. I ventured a timid hint about the helmet, but the sergeant-at-arms sharply cut me off. "Shut up," he shouted. "The helmet fits just right. You're imagining too much of yourself." From that moment on I looked at everything with wide-open eyes. All orders must be obeyed at a run. The barracks is like a pile of ants. Everyone is scurrying in different directions, orders echoing, the stomping of heavy wrought iron boots rattling through the corridors and stairwells. Soldiers, soldiers, soldiers everywhere. In this strange and scary world I felt lonely. December 24, 1939. Christmas Eve. The war should have ended long ago. For the first time I meet Christmas Eve away from home. It must have snowed there by now, and we've had rain for days. Our preparations are in full swing. The training is exhausting. Every day is monotonous. Routine works is on the formation, marching, maneuvers, firearms training, physical exercises, classes in the classroom, household duties, inspections. I was again convinced that I was by no means a prodigy. In fact, I had been going as a sergeant for so long that I decided if I was ever certified as an officer, I would resign from the service and forgo Christmas presents for 7 years. During the endless drill, I imagine hitting that smarters in the head with a rifle butt. I'm dead tired. Tomorrow night I'm on guard duty, but the next day I can sleep an extra hour. That hour is the best Christmas present I'd ever gotten. December 26, 1939. Today we have boxing. We're not allowed to leave the camp. I climbed over the fence after seeing a girl who said she was looking for her brother. Asked around for the guys, but couldn't find him as it was already dark. We walked in the woods for a few hours. I kissed her. She wanted to come back to see if she could meet her brother on Sunday. I might be able to kiss her again. I want to see what she looks like in daylight. If the sergeant or the sentries saw me climbing over the fence, I'd get 3 days in the brig. January 31, 1940. On January 8, I'm enrolled in the military academy. Life here, not at all a picnic by the lake, monotonous muster on the Platz in the best Prussian traditions. But I'm already used to it. Here you all become hard, they say, as hard as Kruppen steel. Anyone who gives us slack will be expelled. Our lives are transitions from the classroom to the lecture hall. We have to study textbooks even in our barracks, often late into the night. We have top-notch instructors, officers and technicians who provide us with a comprehensive knowledge of air and ground combat tactics, aeronautics, engineering, artillery, and meteorology. In addition, we go through the junior command course. We are now waiting for the weather to become stable. Then training flights will begin February 17, 1940. At 1:50 p.m., I made my first flight in a Focke-Wulf 44, a dual-control training biplane with instructor Van Dicken. February 23, 1940. During the past week I have made 35 flights. The ground is covered with deep snow, so skis are attached to the airplanes. Senior 6th flight is a test flight. Senior Lieutenant Well, the senior instructor of the course, is flying with me. He is not at all delighted with my actions. April 1, 1940. I have already made 83 training flights. Senior Lieutenant Wohl examines me on the last 2. You can't call it a landing. Little better than a controlled fall. He shook his head. On top of that, I lost control while coming in for a landing. The airplane was completely out of control, and I fidgeted with the helm out of hopelessness. I realized too late that we had entered a corkscrew and nearly crashed into a church standing nearby. Wohl grabbed the helm and took control. I turned to me. "Did you mean to make my wife a widow? You miserable idiot," he shouted. I was given another chance, definitely my last, after doing 10 more training flights with Van Dicken. Cadets who fail the flight course at the military academy are sent to the Air Defense Forces. This is a very unpleasant prospect. April 2, 1940. Sergeant Van Dicken took me on my final 10 flights today. The other cadets have been flying alone for a long time. Tomorrow I take my final test for the last time to Senior Lieutenant Wohl. In the group under Instructor Van Dicken includes, in addition to me, 3 other cadets. Gaijijit Menapatung de Chu Ain, we live in the same room. Jiga comes from the north of Germany, withdrawn, but very energetic. His father is a simple labourer. He was allowed to study at the Adolf Hitler School, and it was a great chance for such an able boy. After entering the school, he was entitled to be certified as an officer. Menapace and Hien are both Austrians. Both come from the mountains of the Tyrol. Sepp Menapace is the best pilot among us. He seems to fly the plane instinctively, short, swarthy, and very hardy. A real predator. He is timid and clumsy in relations with others. On the ground, the movements of his muscular body resemble the work of an automaton. But in the air, he feels at home, moving cautiously, cat-like. His natural ability allows him to fly an airplane as if he had been doing it all his life. Hien started flying solo after his 40th flight with our instructor. All 3 watched my final landings and cheered me on. Even Geiger, Snicker. You'll do fine. April 3, 1940. at exactly 1 p.m. I flew alone for the first time. When landing, it's better to level the plane 10 meters higher than 1 meter below the ground. Shouted me goodbye, Senior Lieutenant Whoa-oh, overlapping the noise of the engine, and with a sardonic grin backed away. I fastened my seat belt, gradually increasing speed, moving forward. When the speed increases, the helm to myself. The TQBZ practically took off on its own, and I was in the air before the runway ended. The tips of the wings shook, and a warning sounded in the speaker. Look, there is a cadet in the air. He is making his first independent flight. Be careful if you value your life. In a few minutes, I flew around the airfield. The tension gradually went away, and I began to relax. It doesn't take much tension to keep an airplane in obedience. I looked down and saw the shadows of the clouds rushing across the ground. I am really flying free as a bird. Time to land. I began to descend, the ground rushing towards me. Reduce speed, level the car, now soften up, touchdown. I'm on solid ground and even the airplane is intact. My first landing was far from brilliant. The next four were also far from perfect, although they were better than the first. But at least I didn't break the landing gear. May 10, 1940. In the West, our army has begun an offensive into France, but I am afraid I will not have time to participate in this operation. May 16, 1940. Several weeks of sustained good weather have enabled us to improve our flying skills. I have already made about 250 flights. We are now being trained in aerobatics on the Focke-Wulf 44 and the Bucker-Jungmann, obsolete fighters and short-range reconnaissance planes like Arado 65 and Arado 68 and Heinkel 45, Heinkel 46. We fly the Junkers W-34, on which Kohl and Hunefeld flew across the Atlantic, and a special Focke-Wulf Wehe for long-range navigation. Yesterday I flew to East Prussia on an ancient Go 145, and my engine stalled. The main fuel line failed. I was flying at an altitude of only 150 meters, and I didn't have much chance to find a suitable place for an emergency landing. I landed in a ploughed field. The landing gear came off, the plane flipped over, and I crawled out of the wreckage, wiping the blood off my head. I am forced to return by train. My head is thoroughly bandaged. Looking at me, the passengers obviously think I was wounded in the fighting in France. I would be ashamed to admit that I have merely landed with my nose on the ground. May 19, 1940. Failure seems to be following me. My landing gear failed again today as I was coming in for a landing at Old Demi. The wind was blowing hard and my old KL-35 failed. I was again forced to return by train. August 16, 1940. I received my pilot's license. The period of training flights is over. On June 1, I was promoted to the rank of corporal. Meanwhile, the war continues. France capitulated in June. The French army could not stand up to the high morale and modern technical equipment of the German army. They were using long, outdated weaponry. Some of the heavy artillery had been employed as far back as World War I. Units appear to have remained more or less unscathed, even though they lost a lot of equipment at Dunkirk. Skillful manoeuvres by the British High Command allowed most British units to return home without appreciable losses. The German Air Force clearly missed a great opportunity to defeat the British by missing them at Dunkirk. Britain does not seem to be well enough armed to participate in the war, and the Royal Air Force is conducting its operations at a comparatively low level. I don't understand why we didn't use our air superiority over the British. It would have meant the end of the war. The French Air Force was also unable to take a decent part in the fighting. In France, as in Poland, the German Air Force once again demonstrated its advantage in equipment and personnel training. This is not to say that the British and French pilots lacked courage in aerial combat, just that they did not have such good technical capabilities. Such a quick surrender of France I took for granted, due to the low morale of the French army. The French soldiers of 1940 were nothing like the ones who fought so bravely and tenaciously to defend every inch of their homeland in Wididy. For the past 20 years, France had rested serenely on the laurels of the Treaty of Versailles. Every victory carries the danger of such serenity. The mood in Germany is rosy, perhaps even too rosy. August 26, 1940. I'm going to be a fighter pilot. A few days ago, orders came for Menapace and me to be transferred to Fighter Pilot School No. 1 in Verneuken. This afternoon we made our first flight in combat R-68s. Our instructor is Sergeant QL, who distinguished himself in the battles in Poland and of course, his experience is invaluable. From excitement, I even had a vapor when we landed. Our general military training continues. We study basic tactics of air combat. The head of our school, Colonel Count Ewald, served in the famous Squadron Richthofen during the First World War. The chief instructor is Major von Kornacki III. Until recently, he was a deputy to Reichsmarschall Goering. Each of the officers and instructors experienced combat in the past pilots. October 12, 1940. I had hoped to be sent to active units this month. Unfortunately, our training is behind schedule because of the bad fall weather. Right now, we are practicing very intensively. Lately, there have been 1 or 2 crashes in our group every week. Today, Sergeant Schmidt crashed. He was one of our 5. A few days we have been taking a theoretical course to prepare for flights on Messerschmitt 109. It is very difficult to control, very dangerous at first. We can already repeat every movement even in our sleep. This morning we rolled the first 109 out of the hangar and prepared to fly. We drew lots to decide who would fly first. It went to Sergeant Schmidt. He took off at high speed. Such haste could lead to an accident on takeoff if care was not taken. A premature attempt to gain more altitude could cause the airplane to go into a rapid corkscrew. I've seen this many times, most often ending in the death of the pilot. Schmidt went to land, having made 1 circle over the airfield, but chose the wrong speed. It was higher than what he was used to, so Schmidt did not hit the runway. He came in for landing again, but again unsuccessfully. We began to worry. It was obvious that Schmidt had lost his cool. He got up and made 1 last turn before coming in for a landing, when the machine stalled because of too low speed, lost control and, crashing to the ground, exploded 500 meters from the beginning of the landing strip. We rushed like mad to the crash site. I ran up first. Schmidt was thrown out of the cockpit, and he was lying a few meters from the wreckage of the plane. Covered in blood, he was screaming like a wild animal. I bent over my comrade's body and saw that both his legs had been torn off. I lifted his head. His screams horrified me, blood running down my arms. I had never felt so helpless. Then the screams stopped, and there was an even more terrible silence. When Q ran up with the others, Schmidt was dead. Major Kornacki ordered immediate resumption of flying, and less than an hour later another 109 rolled out of the hangar. Now it was my turn. I went into the hangar and washed the blood off my hands. Then the mechanics tightened my seat belt and towed my airplane to the runway. My heart was pounding frantically. Even the deafening rumble of the engine could not drown out Schmidt's death screams in my ears. Even before takeoff, I noticed large, dark blood stains on my jumpsuit. I was terrified. A wild, paralyzing fear gripped me. The only thing that comforted me was that no one could see how scared I was. I circled the airfield several times and gradually calmed down. My composure returned. Eventually I got so much control of myself that I was able to go for a landing. Everything went well. I took off again and landed the plane again, then did the same thing a 3rd time. Tears stood in my eyes as I flipped back the cockpit cover and removed my helmet. Jumping off the wing, I couldn't stop my knees from shaking. Suddenly, Kornacki stood in front of me. The stern gaze of his steely eyes bore into me. "Were you scared?" "Yes, Mr. Kornacki." "You'd better get used to it if you want to fight." I was ashamed. I wish I'd fallen through the ground. October 14, 1940. This morning I attended the funeral ceremony for Sergeant Schmidt's funeral among other NCO candidates. Later that evening there was again a disaster over the flying knoll. Airplanes collided. 2 cadets making the 2nd flight were killed instantly. Again, I was among those who first arrived at the crash site and pulled the body of one of the pilots out from under the wreckage. His head was a shapeless mess. Under such circumstances, I would soon cease to be frightened by the sight of the bloody remains of a pilot lying among the wreckage of an airplane. October 15, 1940. A wonderful day, October 1. 1940, I was promoted to the rank of warrant officer in the Air Force. October 17, 1940. Berneuchen is located quite close to Berlin, and I have made a habit of spending every weekend in the big city. I usually stay in a small hotel near Friedrichstrasse. Quickly, I surveyed all the cabarets and bars near the zoo. On Kurfürst Stendam and Friedrichstrasse, near the museums, theatres, and beautiful buildings on Unter den Linden and in Lusker 10. On weekends I would return to the city. where inexhaustible fun reigned. Each time I immersed myself in the whirlpool of entertainment of the big city, the glitter of which had not yet been touched by the war. My motto, and learn from life. I have never yet had enough money since I came to Verneuichen. November 8, 1940. Warrant Officers Harder, Hoyp and Noak, Sergeant Kuehl, Engineer Corporal Hens are to go to Munster in an airplane Junker 160 Seek for the purpose of receiving and delivering to Verneuichen 3 aircraft Messerschmitt 109. Second 5K, the latest model of transport aircraft. Because of bad weather, we delayed takeoff until 10 o'clock. In the air, we were unable to retract a left landing gear because the shaft broke. Kuehl is at the controls. We are flying low altitude from 30 to 60 meters. The flight mechanic tries to make repairs right in the air, and after about 20 minutes he manages to fix it. Then we climb to an altitude of 200 meters. Kuehl handed over the controls to me, and himself went to rest in the cozy cabin with Hop and Harder. I made a detour south of Berlin and flew along a busy road to the west. To my left, behind a shroud of fog, I could see the radio masts of the transmitter in König Wusterhausen, altitude 350 meters. The fuel pressure has dropped. I can't maintain this altitude any longer. The engine coughed, hissed, and shut down. Hold on tight. Emergency landing. I shouted into the cabin. Behind me, the flight mechanic covered his face with his palms. Below us was dense forest, radio masts on the left, and a tiny field the size of a postage stamp on the right. It was our only chance. Too late, I noticed the power lines ahead. This is the end. Kuehl shell was pale as a sheet. I jerked the steering wheel, and the plane rushed upward, miraculously not hitting the wires. We passed only a few centimeters from them. Then the machine began to fall again, and the wind whistled in my ears. And then there was a bang. 3 huge trees cracked like matchsticks. The left wing fell off. The plane crashed to the ground with a deafening sound, ran for more than 30 meters, destroying everything in its path. Kuehl was thrown on the dashboard. He hit his head. There was silence. Grave silence, broken only by the noise of fuel flowing out of the punctured tank. Kuehl lay unconscious, bloody. I think he'd been hit pretty good. I'm bleeding from a head wound. I tried to open the roof of the cabin, but it was jammed, and so was the cabin door. The smell of kerosene is driving me crazy. We're in a death trap. If the tanks explode, we'll burn alive. In desperation, I started pounding my fists on the plexiglass glass. Suddenly I saw the faces of Hop and Harder looking in. They broke the glass. We pulled Kuehl and the flight engineer out and put them on the grass. They were alive. I tried to administer first aid. Hop and Harder went for help. The wound on my head turned out to be a minor one. I am again forced to return by train. December 18, 1940. 3,000 future officers of the Army, Navy, Air Force and Elite S units are gathered in Berlin's Palace of Sports awaiting the arrival of the Führer and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. 3,000 young, enthusiastic soldiers who have practically completed their training period are to be sent to the front as officers in a few months. I am one of them. Hitler will speak to us. The first of the commanders of these 3 branches of the army arrived Reichsmarschall Goering. He and members of his staff were seated on a wide stage. One of the cadets of the Air Force School, a tall, thin young man with a pale and nervous face, was introduced to him personally. The cadet's name is Hans Joachim Marcel, and he already holds the Iron Cross of the First Degree. Received this high award in the Battle of Britain as the youngest fighter pilot in the German Air Force. A few minutes passed, and we jumped up, obeying the order. Here comes the Führer. Hands went up in silent salute. I saw him walking down the center aisle toward the stage, accompanied by Field Marshal Keitel and Admiral Ritter. Absolute silence reigned for a few minutes in the huge hall. It was a solemn moment. Hitler began to speak. I think the world has never known a more brilliant orator. The magnetism of his personality was irresistible. The whole hall was permeated by the radiation of his incredible willpower and mighty energy. There were 3,000 of us young idealists. We listened to his enticing speeches and took them in with all our hearts. Never before had we experienced such an explosion of patriotic feeling. Here and now, each of us vowed to dedicate our lives to the battle for the motherland that awaited us ahead. I was deeply affected by this event. I will never forget the expression of rapturous ecstasy that was written on the faces of those around me. December 1940. Today received an order for my assignment to Air Wing No. 52. I am to report to the Wing Reserve Squadron at Krefeld on January 2 and have been granted leave of absence until that day. January 2, 1941. Neke Noke arrived at the location of the 52nd Fighter Wing from the 1st Fighter School, as ordered on January 2, 1941. I was assigned to the 1st Wing. Senior Lieutenant Oschliger, my commander, greeted me without any enthusiasm. He shook my hand sluggishly. He had a swollen face with eyes as big as a frog's. I immediately felt an instinctive dislike for this man. A small lieutenant came into the room, looking like a schoolboy. I introduced myself. I didn't like him any better than the senior lieutenant. Very arrogant. I don't know why he doesn't have any decorations. He looks like one of those guys who will wet his pants in the first battle. The squadron I'm assigned to is a reserve wing. It consists of 2 squadrons and a headquarters. New pilots are assigned here from training schools to finalize their skills before going into combat. They are assigned to combat units on an as-needed basis. There are a few more cadets here. We probably won't be sent to active duty until we are certified as lieutenants. Our officer training continues. This endless drill bores me to death. To hell with it, I want to go into real combat. I don't like it here. February 10, 1941. Our squadron was transferred to the south of France. To our surprise, we ended up in the province of Cognac. We were stationed at a former French Air Force base. All the facilities and equipment we found there were primitive. The runway was not the best either. The old town is grey and dreary, but world famous. The name speaks for itself. Besides, we take comfort in the bottles of the famous liquor, of which there is an abundance. March 1, 1941. I have been promoted to the rank of Chief Warrant Officer. I would have been happier if I had been sent to a combat unit. After the end of the French campaign, air warfare became of prime importance in the war. Our observations have shown that the German Air Force is very successful over the English Channel and over England itself. The brutal struggle in the air has been going on between the 2 powers for the last few months. But the fact remains that the victory in the battle over England remained with the pilots of the Royal Air Force. The English, our opponents, proved themselves to be steadfast and very noble fighters. The battles of the British pilots formed a brilliant chapter in the history of aerial combat. When the German High Command believes that the last of the desperately fighting madmen has been shot down, day after day, week after week, our bombers and fighters meet more opponents in the air, unafraid of the fate of a great number of predecessors who die every day. Our failure in attempting to establish the air supremacy necessary for the invasion is a credit to the British pilots, the result of their courage and determination. Ultimately, thanks to them, the German invasion of the British Isles was prevented. Spitfires cause many problems to our troops due to their maneuverability and technical equipment. Attention! Spitfire! German pilots became especially attentive when they heard this warning in their headphones. We thought it was a great achievement to shoot down a Spitfire, and it was indeed true. I really wondered what would happen if I encountered my first Spitfire. Everything is quiet now, even over the English Channel. The Battle of Britain seems to have ended, and ended in defeat. March 7, 1941. I am back in Germany. The squadron is stationed at Debelitz, just outside Berlin. We are part of the iodine units providing air defense for the capital. Tommies only show up at night. March 8, 1941. I spent the next week in Berlin. Yesterday I met my long-time since the days of Verneuischen girlfriend, and we spent a few happy hours together. I couldn't have even imagined this, but I can't change anything. I think I've fallen in love with Lilo. It's the Tommy's fault. A raid caught me outside and I was forced to go to the shelter. A lot of people gathered and I ceded half my seat to a strikingly beautiful girl. She was quite reserved and only thawed out by the time the rebuff sounded, and we were allowed to leave. It was a long time before she let me see her again. And I should have fallen in love with her. March 24, 1941. Lilo and I were engaged today. I think we can get married in the fall, provided I get permission from Human Resources. Today is also my birthday. It's my 20th birthday. Too young to get married, according to Lieutenant Oschliger. Better wait until the war is over, he advises. But the war can drag on for 30 years, and I probably won't dare to get married at that age. In any case, I don't want to wait that long. Schlager advises me to wait, but I realize what he really wants. He's hanging around Lilo like a moth near a flame, and things could end very abruptly if he keeps this up. April 25, 1941. In the name of Führer, I hereby award Chief Warrant Officer Heinz Noack the rank of Lieutenant, effective April 1, 1941. I confirm this appointment in the full hope that by conscientiousness in the performance of his duties in accordance with his oath of office, the confidence reposed in the above cadet by the Commission will be justified. He, for his part, is entitled to the special patronage of the Führer. Berlin, April 22, 1941. Göring, British Minister of Aviation, Commander-in-Chief of the Air Force. This document was handed to me today by the Commander, along with the officer's dagger. So the first goal has been achieved, if only to still get an assignment to a combat unit. May 22, 1941. See you later, Lilo, my love. The train leaves the platform of the Silesian station in Berlin. The cars are crowded, but Lilo somehow made her way to the window. We waved to each other until the train pulled away from the platform. She's staying with my parents. The military echelon to Cherbourg is on the next platform. It leaves in a few minutes. This is my echelon. The order of assignment to the front is in my pocket. May 23, 1941. The 2nd Squadron of the 52nd Fighter Air Group is located in Ostend. I sought out the headquarters located on the east side of the airfield and reported to the commander, Captain Wojtki. He was a man of enormous height and size, and he shook my hand with such force that my eyes darkened. This pleasantly surprised me after the drowsy Oschläger. Wojtki invited me to drink brandy in his apartment. I like this giant. He's an experienced career officer and a fine pilot, wears the Iron Cross, first class, on his worn uniform. In the battles in England, he shot down 15 British planes, but mostly Spitfires. Half an hour later, he took me in his car to the 6th Squadron, where I was assigned. I am the 4th officer in the squadron. The commander of my squadron is Senior Lieutenant Rex Ake. Like the commander, Lieutenants Barkhorn and Ralsix and also have Iron Cross. Lieutenant Krupinski has been here only a week. We served together in the reserve squadron since January. The other pilots are experienced sergeants, fine fellows, excellent at what they do. They look at me suspiciously out of the corner of their eye. They don't seem to think very highly of young lieutenants. And when they found out I didn't play cards, they ignored me completely. In times like these, rank and stripes are worthless. The chief mechanic showed me a camouflaged hangar with my airplane, a Messerschmitt Tom 109E, and grinned. Not the best machine, but you can fly it. Not bad for such an old thing, is what he really thinks. An hour later, I took to the air to get a little more familiar with my junk. I landed terribly. I realize now that even the regular soldiers are squinting at me. I don't seem to inspire much confidence here, which is not very encouraging. In the evening, I was brought up for a training flight with the commander. He seems to be satisfied. May 24, 1941. Up at 4 o'clock in the morning. The commander brought us to the airfield in his car. My airplane is loaded with full ammunition. I complete the engine check. All nilots report ready to the commander. Senior Lieutenant Ree gives the mission for today. The squadron is to make 2 patrol flights over the south coast of England. The first flight at N0, the second at 17:0. At all other times, all pilots are to be on 5-minute alert in case of alarm. 4 airplanes must be ready for takeoff at all times. This is my first sortie, as part of the 3rd Squadron under Lieutenant Barkhorn. I am to follow in position number 4, led by non-commissioned officer Grunert. After the meeting, everyone went to bed, sprawled out in chairs and on couches waiting for breakfast. I went outside, too excited to sleep, paced between planes until I got bored. Back in the barracks, I tried to read. After 10 sorties, I would probably sleep as well as the rest of the guys. At 0, a resident showed up with 2 baskets. Breakfast. I suddenly realized I was hungry. At 7:50, Senior Lieutenant Ree put on his life jacket. Wake up, guys. Everybody out? The planes have rolled out of the hangars. My car stands at the far end of the Flying Zero, next to the plane non-commissioned officer, Grunert Cité. He wandered near it and yawned. Okay, if we get into battle, stay close to me no matter what happens, or Spitfire will make holes in your pants. 7:55. I buckled my parachute straps. The mechanic helped me strap myself in. 7.58. I'm very excited. The commander raised his hand. The hatch is closed. Contact. Engines roaring. We're driving slowly across the field. A few minutes later, the squadron is in the air. The right turns immediately to the sea. Visibility is poor. The clouds are at 150 meters. In a few seconds, the land is out of sight. The horizon is barely recognizable. I've increased my speed as my buggy lags behind the others. We head west, keeping low over the water. The sea is calm. There is no sign of ships or airplanes. We maintain silence on the airwaves. Only the monotonous hum of the engine can be heard. The grey shadow looms vaguely in the distance. The coast of England. We are crossing the border. It leads us for several minutes along the railroad toward Canterbury. There's no traffic. People have their heads up and are looking at us, no doubt mistaking us for Spitfires as the fog prevents us from being seen properly. Suddenly we encountered anti-aircraft fire from the left. Orange-coloured tracer shells merged into a line, these pearl necklaces seeming to disappear behind us into the clouds. The commander made a turn and dived toward the ground. I didn't notice what target he was attacking. My lead also spiraled to the ground, opening fire. I saw that he was attacking an anti-aircraft gun position covered with sandbags. The anti-aircraft shells flashed right in front of me. Grunert came in for a second attack. I took aim and checked my weapon. The fire was getting denser, glinting against the grey background of the clouds. I couldn't get into a comfortable firing position because I could lose sight of Grunert. At any moment, the Spitfires could emerge from the fog and attack us. The squadron lined up in the same order and headed east, leaving behind a blaze of fires. I never fired a single shot and felt like a complete idiot. Truth be told, I was too excited to hit the target. I need to learn to stay calm. To the north, at Ramsgate and Margate, are airfields where fighter jets are based. We haven't seen any Spitfires or Hurricanes. Maybe they're on their way. I'm at the back of the line and it gets very hot in here, especially the newbies. If they're as worried as I am. 9.14. Landing at Ostend. I reported to the commander. So what did you see? He asked. Did you hit anyone? No, Mr. Grunert. Why not? I didn't shoot at all. Ree laughed and said, patting me on the shoulder, Don't get upset, next time be more careful. Rome wasn't built at once either. At 17.5 we flew to the second mission. This time none of us had a chance to open fire. We circled the sea between Folkestone and Dover for a long time. Tommies don't fly in such bad weather and the weather over the islands was terrible. May 27, 1941. The sky over Channel has been covered with heavy clouds for the last 2 days. There is no activity on either side. Today we can organise an attack on the British airfield near Ramsgate. Due to poor visibility, we are kept at a very low altitude. We took to the air for the first attack at 7.15. Grunert and I decided to set fire to the fuel tanks. Not a single airplane in sight. We attacked again and again, shooting everything that moved. The anti-aircraft guns returned sparse fire, but it didn't bother us much. Several fuel tanks were burning by the time it was time for us to turn back. We returned for a second attack at 10:0. This time I chose an anti-aircraft position at the west end of the runway. I went in for the attack from a height of only 3 meters. The Tommies fought back hard. Ribbons of tracer shells came very close to me, but I only hit sandbags. I tried to attack again. Grunert was fiercely firing at the camouflaged hangar where I had spotted the Hurricane. My third attack was successful. I saw a line from my 20mm gun go through the anti-aircraft gun. The first gunner fell out of his seat. In my earphones I heard Spitfires. 6 or 8 enemy planes were approaching us from the north. Not quite clear what to do, I kept behind Grunert. A scramble began, which lasted several minutes. My comrades warned each other of the Tommy attacks. Grunert ordered me to stay close to him. We were at an altitude of only a few meters. The left wing of my plane nearly grazed the treetops as I turned around to follow Grunert. A Spitfire flashed right over my head, then another one appeared briefly in my sights and I opened fire. It immediately dived into the clouds. "I got it," shouted someone. I think it was Barkhorn. The enemy plane went down on the other side of the causeway. These bastards can make incredible maneuvers. It seemed there was no way to capture them in the scope. Grunnert tried for several minutes to hit the two planes flying close to each other, but they managed to evade, hiding in the low clouds. Fuel was running low. It was time to go home. A red warning light could appear on the instruments at any moment. The same was true for the others. I turned east. When we landed at Ostend, it turned out that there was no Sergeant Bauer. May 28, 1941. The Tommies arrived on a return visit. The Blenheims and Spitfires had been raiding all day. They appeared at dawn, at 4:00, as we were preparing the planes for takeoff. Several Hurricanes on a glide attacked our repair hangar. Our planes went up to intercept. Unfortunately, my machine cannot take off. Because of a malfunction in the mechanism, I cannot remove the right landing gear. At 18:30, I finally took to the air with Barkhorn, Krupinski and Grunnert. Blenheims, accompanied by Spitfires, detected near Dunkirk. Our anti-aircraft gunners have already fired on them, without any effect, of course. Anti-aircraft gunners are always very important when they get a chance to fire continuously into the air. They don't like it when we fighter pilots say that they don't shoot anyone down. We've reached an altitude of 6,000 meters. The sky's perfectly clear. The sun from the west is shining in our eyes. I noticed a dot that appeared to me to be an enemy plane, but it turned out to be an oil slick on the cockpit glass. Orders have come from the base to move towards Calais. Not far from us spotted Blenheims. Feeling very excited, I examined the sky. Suddenly the Barkhorn turned sideways, heading towards where we came from. The Hurricanes lined up to tail us, the only position I couldn't observe. They tried to attack. We went up almost vertically, turned sharply to the left and were in their tail. They started to run away towards the open sea, but our speed was faster, and in 2 minutes we caught up with them. The fight broke out. There was a terrible confusion. We were spinning around each other like in a frenzied whirlpool. I got on Tommy's tail and tried to hold on. He spotted me and dived to the left, toward the sun. I rushed after him, firing all my guns, but the sun was blinding me. Damn it! I tried to cover my eyes with my hand, but it didn't help. He was hiding. I couldn't contain my anger at myself. Grunnert tried to cheer me up. I replied that I couldn't see very well and had to turn around. To think I might have shot down my first airplane. Next time I should get sunglasses. May 30, 1941. Patrol the Dover-Ashford-Canterbury area is our next assignment. The Milk Journey, as the squadron's veterans called it. The weather is cloudy, visibility is poor. We took to the air for an hour and a half and returned without meeting a single enemy airplane. June 21, 1941. 3 weeks have passed since the squadron last took to the air. We are now based at Suwałki, a former Polish Air Force base near the Russian border. Dive bombers and fighter bombers are also stationed at this base. For the past 2 weeks, our troops had been assembling an ever-increasing force along the eastern border. No one knew what was going on. There were rumors that the Russians would allow us to pass through the Caucasus to seize the oil fields of Central Asia and the Dardanelles and take control of the Suez Canal. In the evening came the order to shoot down the Berlin-Moscow flight. The commander took to the air with staff pilots, but they were unable to intercept the Douglas. All night long, we speculated. What did Operation Barbarossa mean? That was the code name for the extraordinary military activity in the east of the Reich. The order to shoot down a Russian Douglas convinced me that we were on the brink of war with Bolshevism. June 22, 1941. 0.0. General alarm for the whole squadron. On the airfield, everything is on the move. All night I heard the rumble of tanks and vehicles. We are only a few kilometers from the border. 4.30. All pilots ordered to gather at the squadron headquarters for a briefing. The commander, Captain Wojtke, Read the Führer's special order to the armed forces of the Reich for the day. Germany is attacking the Soviet Union. 5.0. The squadron took to the air and went into action. 4 machines of our squadron, including mine, are equipped with a mechanism for dropping bombs, and I have undergone serious training in bombing over the past few weeks. I now have a bomb-dropping device and 105-pound bombs mounted on the fuselage of my good Emil. It will give me great pleasure to bomb the filthy Ivans. Flying low over the wide plains, we saw endless columns of German troops heading east. Squadrons of bombers and dive bombers flew not far from us in the same direction. We are tasked with attacking Russian headquarters located in the forests west of Druskininkai. In the Russian territory, to my surprise, everything seemed to be plunged into slumber. We located the Russian headquarters and flew over the wooden buildings at low altitude, but not a single Russian soldier could be seen. Diving down on one of these barns, I pressed a button and opened the bomb hatch. I could clearly feel how much lighter the airplane became, freed from the load. The others began bombing at the same time. Huge masses of earth surged into the air, and for a while we lost visibility because of the smoke and huge amounts of dust. One of the buildings instantly caught fire. The camouflage nets were torn off the vehicles, then they were overturned by the blast wave. Finally, the Avans appeared. They scurried back and forth in confusion, resembling a disturbed anthill. Men in their underpants rushed into the woods in search of cover. I saw light anti-aircraft guns. Capturing them in the scope, opened fire with machine guns and both cannons. Ivan, who was standing at the cannon in underpants, fell to the ground. Now the next one. Going in for the attack again, I gave them heat. The Russians quickly came to their senses and returned fire. That got me even more excited. Well, wait a minute, you bastards. I made another circle to attack. I had never shot so well before. I descended to a height of 6 meters, barely missing the treetops, then soared sharply upward. My Ivans were lying on the ground behind their cannon. One of them jumped up and rushed running into the woods. I attacked 5 or 6 more times. We circled over the Russians like a swarm of bees. Almost all the shacks were burning. I shot a truck, which also caught fire after the first turn. 5:56. The squadron returned in full strength. Smiles shone on the pilots' faces as they reported to the commander. Planes quickly refueled, loaded full ammunition. On the airfield feverishly scurrying people and cars. The bombers have returned from their mission. They are supporting the ground forces. Their pilots are also jubilant. 6:30, just 40 minutes after landing. We're back in the air. Our target is the same headquarters we attacked the other day. We can already see columns of smoke from the burning houses from afar and rush there. By this time, a significant air defence force has gathered to greet us. This is similar to the fighting at Canterbury. I worked the Ivanov anti-aircraft guns again. This time I dropped bombs on the firing position. The dirt and dust settled, and I saw that the cannon was smashed. That will save the Ivans a lot of trouble. The Russians seem to have taken cover in the woods and hid their vehicles. We began methodically firing machine guns at the forest around the camp. In several places, the fire blazed up. The fuel tanks must have caught. I shot every target I could see until I ran out of ammo. We got back at 7:20. Once again, our formation is instantly ready to go. The ground services work clearly and without error. We assist them and give a detailed description of what happens during the operation. This time we prepare the vehicles for departure in a record time of 22 minutes. We take off immediately. There is practically nothing left in the Russian camp. We attack any targets spotted in the nearby woods. I dropped bombs over the last structure still intact. Krupinski did the same, destroying what was left. The camp was completely eliminated.